Veterans in Transition is sponsored by HireVeteransFirst.com, Jelani Consulting, and Village Connector Community.
Welcome to Veterans in Transition, where we promote the veteran community. Each week we travel around the region highlighting veteran-related news, issues, and events. In this episode, Dr. Chester Thompson. Born in Costa Rica, he became a U.S. citizen in 1989. It was a proud moment to become a U.S. citizen and serve in the United States Marine Corps. Correspondent Weedham Abdul has this soldier's transition story.
Tell us about your journey from Costa Rica to the United States.
My journey from Costa Rica to the United States began in 1971 at the tender age of 6. I flew up here. I flew from Puerto Limon, Costa Rica to John F. Kennedy in New York City, along with my younger cousin Sharon. She was only 4. And we were greeted by my aunt who picked us up and then took us by cab to the home that I ended up growing up in up until the age of 18, 1825 Andrews Avenue. So my Aunt Aldit was perhaps one of my favorite aunts, and she greeted us because we didn't have a car. And then at that point, I met my mother, aunts, uncles, and other relatives. But it was an incredible experience because I left a home, raised by my grandmother and grandfather and aunt, and here I am in this big city, in this big, 2-family duplex, meeting all these strangers. So that was an emotional journey for me. And then later to, end up going to PS 26. Again, most schools start in September. I ended up starting in November. So I kind of started off with a deficit in terms of, my early education. I struggled that first year in school, and there was a language deficit, and then just trying to really understand some of the lingo and the other kids my age. But overall, I think it really established me in terms of really dealing with all the struggles that I will have to confront throughout the course of my life.
What did the United States mean to you as a kid growing up in Costa Rica?
Honestly, all I heard was, the United States was the place to be. Growing up in Costa Rica, I didn't really know much about it. It was like a distant land to me, but I would see, paperwork or letters from my mother that she would send, said the United States on it. And I would hear like my grandmother and grandfather say, oh, they live in the United States. Life is so good there, and so that was the extent of what I knew. It was a better life. So for me, when I arrived here in the United States, it was like, wow, what a transition, because I saw cars. I saw people dressed in all types of different outfits. Living in Limon, fairly humble town, not really a whole lot. In many cases, people are walking around barefooted, down by the stream, little cot. We're here, we're looking at big homes, cars. So it was a major transition for me. You could see the difference in terms of wealth and what people had versus what people didn't have. So that was what the United States meant for me at that time in my life.
Tell us about what attracted you to the Marine Corps.
What attracted me to the Marine Corps, it started with when I was in college. So my first 2 years of college, I struggled. And my mother, she was a nurse's aide, she didn't have a lot of money. And so by the end of my sophomore year, I was actually thinking about, quitting, dropping out of college. I was not doing well academically. My mother didn't have the money. I did not enjoy the struggle. So I came home that summer, took up a summer job, and I worked there on Fordham Road in the Bronx, near the Grand Concourse. And there were like 5 kiosks, one for every major branch: Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard. And I was intrigued by the uniform and the travel and the adventures, so I visited each one. I stopped in and I decided, you know what, I like the Marine Corps. There was a certain mystique about it, but there's that adventure about it. It looked it was very masculine. I enjoyed playing sports. I ran track, played football, and I liked that sort of camaraderie with other young men. That's one of the things that attracted me to the Marine Corps, particularly the dress blues, the uniform, watching films of the young men with the rifle and the maneuvers and cadences. That appealed to me. Although superficial, it simply appealed to me, and that's why I joined the Marine Corps.
How did the military help you further your education?
And as I was saying before, so by the end of my sophomore year, I signed up for the Marine Corps. Back then they had what they call an 84K reserve program. So I went in, I signed up, and then went back to school the following summer. I went to parasailing boot camp, came out of parasailing, went in May of 1985, graduated from boot camp August of that same summer, went back to University of Maryland. The difference now, I had qualified for the GI Bill. So I finished up my last year at Maryland, had a GI Bill. It encouraged me to continue my education, but more importantly, it taught me perseverance. It taught me grit. Some of the things that I talked about initially from my initial first grade at PS 26, although I had to struggle in terms of the language deficit and things like that, I struggled in college, but the Marine Corps taught me grit. Stick through in this, how to overcome. And that was the one thing I liked about the Marine Corps. Additionally, I was able to get the financial resources to complete my college education. And then upon graduation, I went on active duty for the next 2 years, and I was stationed at I&I Staff, Washington, D.C. It's basically, we work with the reserve units and things of that nature. Spent a lot of time at Quantico, Virginia as well, for a lot of our maneuvers and procedures. But that's the thing that the Marine Corps really helped me in terms of the work I do now. How to, quite frankly, not give up. Despite what you're going through, despite what's happening in your life, you have a goal. As we say in the Marine Corps, there's a mission, you have to complete the mission. So to your question, it taught me how to start something and finish it.
Tell us about your transition from military service to the private sector.
So my transition from the Marine Corps was from working at I&I Staff, Washington, D.C. as a Sergeant E5 to working as a community planner, Prince George's County, Maryland. So no longer wearing boots and utes, but to wearing just a nice shirt and slacks. It was a fairly gradual transition, but I think for me, I was able to succeed quite well because Prince George's County, Maryland, the D.C. area, many of my colleagues were former military as well, and I think I was able to find a family of folks who were able to support and also, quite frankly, celebrate me. And I think for me, it was not that difficult, particularly as a black man with a military background and having that military bearing. It actually helped me in more ways than one because it helped me in terms of being able to navigate a bureaucracy as I had to in the military. So for me, it was a fairly easy transition. And fortunately, I had individuals in my network that helped guide me along as I transitioned from the military to the civilian sector.
Tell us about your career journey from adjunct professor to vice president.
Wow, that was an interesting journey. Still a journey. So I started out as a adjunct professor in the communication skills department at Robert Morris University. I really enjoyed it. I taught business professional communications. And because of my background working in corporate America, I was able to bring my real world experience in the classroom and to combine that with some of the theoretical framework that the authors in the book would write. Students, in many cases, they're like, what are these people saying? I said, well, this is what they're telling you. This is what the book says, but let me share with you what this means in the real world. So unbeknownst to me, there was a website called Rate My Professor. Did not realize students had access to go online and rate their professors. And I looked at this website, and to my surprise, the students liked my teaching style. And the leadership, my boss at the time, the provost, who was the chief academic officer, He had an opportunity for me to, work closely within the university as an advisor, and my initial job was to basically advise African American athletes, including all black male students, because he felt that, one, based on my teaching style and what the students said about me, this person could be a good fit. I did that successfully for a year and a half, and then I was later promoted to a director of community outreach and student affairs, and I performed well in that position for another year and a half. And then one day I was tapped on the shoulder. For the first time, we had the first African American president, Dr. Chris Howard, at Robert Morris University. The provost and some of the senior leadership told them about the work I was doing with African American men. And the big move at Robert Morris at that time, it was almost a perfect storm, was to increase our retention rate as well as our enrollment of African American male and female students. And they felt that I would be a good person to do so, so I was then promoted to Assistant Vice President for Underrepresented Minority Student Achievement, and that's the role I occupy at this point. And it's been very grateful. I enjoyed it tremendously. The biggest challenge is really making sure that we encourage our young men and women, first and foremost, to speak up, something I teach them in communication skills. Equally, work with them in terms of financial aid. I just had a young lady who, she was lagging in terms of her finances. She owed the school $4,000. And I was able to get that money in her account, and she was able to register. Because most colleges and universities, if you owe any sort of money, you can't register. I say that to say, as I said earlier, during my college journey, I had that same situation. And I made a vow that any young man or woman that comes in my office, as long as they're doing well and they're motivated, I'm going to make sure I do everything in my power to keep them at Robert Morris University and to see them walk across that big stage.
Talk about your work in the mission in the Veterans Office at Robert Morris University.
So I work closely with retired Brigadier General Dan Rhoda, who's also a professor at Robert Morris, as well as Major Nelson, in respect to the Army ROTC program. And it's interesting you ask, because we have students that come in, particularly veteran students, that are returning to college. So they're considered non-traditional. In many cases, they're older. They've been out of school for a long time. And oftentimes, it's just a matter of helping them navigate their way through Robert Morris University in terms of classes, what major they should take. The one thing about the veteran population is that they're disciplined. However, in some cases, they may lack the study skills, the appropriate study skills to succeed in college. And so we work closely with other key stakeholders within the university, counselors, faculty members, to make sure that these men and women not only get into Robert Morris, but they attain the skills that they desire, whether it's an accounting degree. Some students end up going into media arts and film. Other students may just want to complete a certificate program. But whatever it is, we try to work closely with them. I also work closely with one of my colleagues, Heather, who she makes sure she certifies the veterans benefits. So it's a very lengthy, very complex process. She's the only person that knows about this, and so we work closely with her in terms of helping students and guiding students to her office in terms of making sure that they get the qualified GI benefits that they deserve.
You're on the board of directors of the Pennsylvania Cyber School in the great town of Midland, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Talk about the school.
I was so honored. I received an email early in the year, at the top of the year, regarding their interest in me becoming a part of the PA Cyber. And so I met with the board chair and the CEO of the school, and basically they wanted someone to come in and bring in some new ideas, innovation. So one of the big things that I'm doing in my work is in the area of enrollment. So we have kids at PA Cyber, especially our juniors and seniors in high school, that are interested in college. So I work closely with the community, PA Cyber, many of the local schools, school district, Rochester School District, Lincoln Park, and make students, parents, and others, make them aware of Robert Morris University and all of its offerings in terms of academics, different majors, financial aid. More importantly, teaching students and their parents about financial aid literacy. I often tell parents, you know what, you may want to start when they're ninth grade because it's a very lengthy process. Don't wait till the last minute. Understand the complexity of filling out that financial aid form. Understand what's required in terms of a competitive GPA, a competitive SAT score. So those are some of the innovative ideas that I'm bringing to PA Cyber students as well, so that they can have the necessary information to hopefully, whether it's Robert Morris University or any school. Recently, one of our students, he actually graduated from PA Cyber, and he's attending the U.S. Air Force Academy. So that's the caliber of students that we have at PA Cyber, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
What are some of the hurdles that you had to overcome in your career?
I think as a veteran in higher education, it's very interesting you asked that because I have a sort of military bearing. Academia is, academics can be very cerebral. They're very more reserved. I may not be so reserved. I think it's just style, adapting to your environment. And so one of the things that I've learned, especially working in sales, my old boss, John Soniso, always told me, think like a chameleon. You have to be a chameleon. You have to adapt and overcome to your environment. And I think that's been my biggest challenge in terms of, adapting and overcoming. And so my style as a veteran, as a corporate person in academia, it's taken time. I've had to learn how to adjust or adapt to the way you communicate with senior leadership at your level and as well as below level. Keep in mind, in the military, we have a chain of command, and it's very black and white. I have more stripes than you. In higher education, sometimes it's ambiguous, and so that could be one of the biggest challenges that an individual experiences. So I think it's important to understand and learn the culture that you're working in, and that in itself will help you navigate those turbulent waters.
How do you give back to the veteran community?
I give back to the veteran community by, first of all, making sure that I, welcome each veteran within my organization at Robert Morris University. But over the last 2 years, every year we have what we call Veterans in Crisis. And on average, 22 veterans per day commit suicide. And it could be because of PTSD, some of the mental anguish that they experience from combat. So one of the things that I put together and my colleagues at Robert Morris University, we would actually commit to 22 push-ups every day for the entire month. And we also would actually make known the website link as well as areas where you can donate to Veterans in Crisis, because a lot of our veterans are struggling out here, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so those are some of the things that I do in terms of giving back to veterans.
Can you identify what military experience has shaped you as a leader?
Oh, absolutely. The thing I loved about the Marine Corps as a corporal and then, of course, as a E5, so E4, E5, you're a platoon leader. And typically a platoon leader is an officer at a junior grade. We call them butter bar lieutenants and then first lieutenants. As a non-commissioned officer, as a corporal, I had the opportunity to be a squad leader over a group of at least 5 to 7 young men. And that really helped to, if you will, sharpen the saw to really shape my leadership skills and abilities, because you had to, first of all, you had to insert yourself as a leader. You had to make sure you tell the junior rank and file you have to do certain things, and you had to give them those orders. But you also had to stand by it and then hold them accountable. And then myself equally, I was held accountable by senior officers. So that really shaped my leadership skill, and having the respect for the chain of command, being able to be truthful, speak when spoken to, come when called. I felt that the Marine Corps was the best experience I had in terms of really helping to groom me for leadership and dealing with hostile situations and being cool under fire.
Can you talk about the Black Male Leadership Development Institute?
Absolutely. So the Black Male Leadership Development Institute, also referred to as BMLDI, it's a program that ties African American males in grades 9 through 12 together. And we have two components. There's the summer residency program, which is housed at Robert Morris University. So the young men, typically the latter part of June, usually around Father's Day, they come in on a Sunday and they stay till Saturday. But during the course of the week, we actually have an agenda, a very packed full agenda, and at its core, we really try to hone in on their leadership skills. One of the things that we do is we teach them about leadership, accountability, self-awareness, self-actualization, and things like that. More importantly, we invite African-American men, women, and other individuals throughout the greater Pittsburgh area and beyond to come in and to facilitate numerous seminars, workshops, and things of that nature. Last year, we sought the research efforts of Dr. Tony Mitchell and Dr. James Stewart, both Penn State professors. They did a year-long study of our young men, and what they found was that many of our young men, great students, but they're also very athletically inclined. And that's something that we realized, because a lot of our young men, their interest is focused on sports. So with that said, what we ended up doing is we tweaked the program and we invited the first African-American head coach, Bernard Clark, who came in and facilitated a program around leadership, accountability, and academics. To say that academics and sports, they're intertwined. And how do we do that? We want to teach young men to be great men, great fathers, and hopefully great leaders. And that is BMLDI at its core. After they complete the 7-day residency, they go home, and then they come back for what we call the Saturday Institute. They meet usually the third Saturday, 9 a.m. to about 1 p.m. throughout the course of the academic year. Saturday Institute parallels their academic school year. And what we do is, it's all about frequency. So this allows us to continue to work with our young men to keep them on track in terms of their leadership development. And with that said, we have guest speakers, seminars, and other field trips. We just had, on September 8th, I facilitated a STEM networking event where we had not just the young African-American young men, BMLDI, we also invited girls, BFLDI program, as well as other students throughout the greater Pittsburgh area, to include Latino students, so they can be exposed to the myriad of occupations in STEM fields. And this is important, particularly since technology, we're living in a world that's technology driven, and so we want to expose our young men and women to all the different things that, or opportunities that's available to them. And then we also connect them with mentors in those fields and so forth. So it's a great program. It's been around for 10 years. Since its inception, we've actually cultivated roughly 750 young men. And each year I put together an outcomes report, and we typically, roughly 85–90% of our young men go on to four-year colleges and universities. So we're pretty proud of the work we're doing.
Is there anything else on your mind that you would like to share?
For me, the biggest issue right now, I'm really concerned about the uncertainties of the world that we're living in today. And I think that the one thing that really bothers me is when people make comments that, oh, you know, you don't need a bachelor's degree, you don't need the education as as our forefathers and mothers have taught us. I firmly believe now more than ever, our kids need formal education, but more importantly, we have to groom, we have to mentor our kids. I'm very passionate about that. I often see young men and women, they're not groomed because they don't have fathers, in some cases mothers. They don't have that elder. When we were coming up, we had someone that kept us in line. Too often our kids don't have that. They yearn for it. It's our responsibility as adults to make sure that we keep our eye on our kids and other people's kids. But that's a problem with our society today because everyone is so litigious. We have to look beyond that because if we don't, we're going to lose a lot of our kids. And that's the one thing that's of concern to me. We have to mentor our young men and women. We have to groom them. We have to take them and walk with them. We're not going to hold their hand, but we're going to guide them. And that is something that I think is missing today. My only words of wisdom, I would tell particularly young people to stay the course. If you start, finish whatever you start. Don't ever have any regrets. Don't get to a point in life and say, I wish I coulda, woulda. Just do and continue, keep your nose to the grind.
That's all for this edition of Veterans in Transition. We ask that you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have a story to tell, reach out to us at vetsintransition.com. And remember, we all have a story to tell. Until next time.